Hi, everybody. It's a real honor to be here with you to share and learn with you all together. And as Maria said, I'm a pediatrician and specialize in adolescent medicine. It's not just because I look like an adolescent still, although people do tell me that. I actually had my 40th birthday this year. But it's because I care so deeply about the well-being and health of adolescents, and I know all of you here do as well. And promoting resilience and positive youth development is at the very core of that, and mindfulness is one of the most powerful tools that I know of to promote resilience in our young people, and I'm really pleased to be able to share some of that with you today. I'd like to start with a mindfulness experience. This is called breathing and smiling. And the reason I'd like to start with an experience is because talking about mindfulness without experiencing it is missing the point a little bit. It's like going to a restaurant, reading the menu, talking to the waiter about the food, but not eating anything. So today we're going to have a few brief mindfulness experiences, and I'd like to invite all of you to join in with this with an open heart and an open mind, whether you've been a long-time mindfulness practitioner or whether this is your very first experience with something like this. I invite you to just come in with an open mind, treat it like an experiment, and see what happens for you this morning. So breathing and smiling is two words that can describe what mindfulness is all about. This comes from Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Zen master. So I'm going to first invite the sound of this bell. Hearing the bell, just arriving in this moment. Letting go of your busy morning, all of the things you had to do to get here. Letting go of your busy day and all of the things that you have yet to come. Simply being here right now just as you are. You can close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. And as the bell fades away, connecting with your breath. Just noticing what it feels like to breathe in this moment. You breathe thousands of times a day, but how often do you really know that you're breathing? This wonderful gift that gives us life, this miracle. Just checking in with what it feels like to breathe and to be alive right now. Without needing to control your breath or force it to be any different. This isn't work. Simply resting in the sensations. Perhaps saying to yourself quietly, breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. In, out. And now, inviting a gentle smile to this awareness of your breathing. This smile is like a smile that you might have when you see a friend on the street. It's inviting an attitude of friendliness and kindness to this moment, whether this is a pleasant moment or whether this is a difficult moment. So bringing that smile to the corner of your lips, just noticing what happens, if anything, with a sense of curiosity. Breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I smile. Breathing, smiling. And we'll hear one sound of the bell to end this guided meditation. Opening your eyes if they were closed, bringing it back to the room. And just checking in with how you're feeling right now in this moment. Okay, thank you all for experiencing that with me. I'd like to start by telling a little story about how I came into mindfulness. Some of you may recognize this monk here on the right-hand side. This is Thich Nhat Hanh, very famous Vietnamese Zen master. And this is me with my father and Thich Nhat Hanh in 1999 at his retreat center in France. And I went on my first mindfulness retreat just before I started medical school, after I had graduated from undergrad. And when I got there, I thought that I had an idea of mindfulness. I had read a bunch of books, I had written papers. In fact, this is Thich Nhat Hanh reading a paper that I wrote in university, and I thought it was very impressive. Because I thought I knew a lot about mindfulness. It was like this really interesting philosophy, this concept about being in the present moment, and I get that. But being in this retreat actually was an eye-opening and heart-opening experience for me. And it really changed my life because it helped me to see that mindfulness is actually not a philosophy. It's not a theory. It's not an idea. but it's actually a way of being. It's a path that I could walk every day in my life. It's a concrete practice. And since then, it's been, I've done my best to make it a part of my everyday life. It's really helped me to get through some of my own hard times. So it's been a powerful resilience tool for my own life. And then in the past few years, I've been offering it to the young people that I serve as well, to help them be resilient to the challenges that they face too. I'd like to tell another story about a young person I worked with. And we were playing around with this idea of suffering equals pain times resistance. This is an equation that we teach in mindfulness. And so I was with this young person. She was about 18 and with her mother. And I said, have you had any times where there was pain, but you didn't suffer? Because usually most of the time we think of pain and suffering as the same thing. But can you think of any experiences in your life where pain and suffering were not the same thing? And the mother's eyes lit up. And she said, you know, when I gave birth to my daughter here 18 years ago, I was in a huge amount of pain, but I didn't suffer. And so I got really curious about that. I said, tell me how you were able to experience that pain without suffering. And she said, I just breathed and I embraced the pain. And I said, that is a wonderful definition of mindfulness. That's exactly what we're practicing here. How did you learn that? And she said, well, the doctor who delivered my baby 18 years ago taught me that. And it turns out that doctor, her name is Adrienne Ross, and she's now a very famous mindfulness teacher. And she was teaching mindfulness, this is probably 20 years ago, as a family physician, but not using the word mindfulness. So mindfulness is everywhere. It's not something that's mystical or just for Buddhists. As an adolescent health specialist, I'm very concerned about health issues of young people. And these are the top 3 killers of young people in both the United States and Canada. Number 1 is accidents, and I put that in quotes because many accidents have to do with risky behaviors and have to do with substance use. Number 2 is suicide, and number 3 is homicide. And these far outstrip many of the biomedical things we think about, like infections and cancer and heart disease, by far. So what do all of these things have in common? Well, they're all behavioral, they're all preventable, and they're all stress-related. And beyond the things that kill young people, the things that affect their health are what in medical school we learned as adolescent health risk behaviors. So these are things like using substances, disordered eating, self-harm behaviors, fights, violence, all kinds of things like that. And so the traditional teaching was, well, if we just tell young people to stop doing these bad things, then their health would get better. But those of you who work with young people, does that work? Just tell them to stop doing the thing? Of course it doesn't work. So my mentor in adolescent medicine, his name is Dr. Kenneth Ginsberg, and he taught me to see adolescent risk behaviors really in terms of stress and coping. We know that young people feel enormous amounts of stress, and we've heard this morning what are some of the sources of stress for young people. School stress, family stress, peers, bullying, social networking, all kinds of things. And stress is uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good to be stressed. And adolescents, they haven't had enough life experience yet to learn how to cope with that stress. In fact, that is one of the key developmental tasks of adolescents, is to learn behaviors to cope with stress. And there's basically 2 ways they can go. Number 1 is negative coping strategies. These are those risk behaviors that I told you about. And I don't call them negative because they don't work. In fact, if I'm being honest with a young person, I have to admit, you know, when you're feeling really anxious, you're feeling really stressed out, and you smoke a joint, you're going to feel better for a little bit. I get that, so I can see why you're doing that. The problem is that it leads to more stress because it leads to behaviors or decisions that cause more consequences that lead to more stress. And so kids can get caught in a negative stress and coping cycle. And so one of my most important jobs as an adolescent health specialist when I'm seeing a young person, number 1 is to respect and honor that young person for wanting to deal with their stress. I can see why you're doing that, and I see that this is hard. And then number 2, guiding them towards positive coping strategies. So I'm worried about your marijuana use. I'm worried it's going to get in the way of what you want to do. Can we talk about healthier ways to deal with the anxiety that you're feeling? And that leads to relief and doesn't lead to more stress. And mindfulness is just one example of a positive coping strategy. It's one of the most powerful, but it's certainly not the only one. Another mentor of mine, Dr. Michael Resnick, in the field of adolescent health, has taught me to think about resilience in terms of a bridge. And in fact, I think the word resilience was borrowed from engineering. So what helps the Golden Gate Bridge survive an earthquake? And when we think about resilience in young people, it is what helps a young person thrive in the face of those adverse childhood experiences that we've been learning about this morning. And there's basically 2 factors. You can boil it down to 2 factors. Number 1 is external protective factors. So those are things like the towers and the cables. Those are the things that are going to hold that bridge up in the face of an earthquake. And for a young person, it's connectedness with schools, with family, with caring adults, with positive peers. And the second thing is internal protective factors. So that's the construction and materials of the bridge itself. And those are the things like the coping skills that a young person is developing as they grow up to learn. And so when I'm meeting with a young person who's facing a really difficult challenge, one of my things that I'm really trying to do as I get to know them is identify what are those internal and external protective factors and strengths that I can see already, and then how can we build on those to help that young person to be more resilient. And the positive youth development literature is an outgrowth of the resilience literature in the health field. And as a doctor, I don't see it as my job just to help an adolescent get to adulthood without becoming addicted to substances, without getting an eating disorder, without having suicidality or depression. In fact, really what I see as our goal is to help young people reach their full potential. And so some of the leaders in the positive youth development field have put it this way: youth are not problems to be managed, but are resources to be developed. Problem-free is not fully prepared. And so by reframing that is in terms of not just solving problems, but helping youth reach our full potential, that's really what I see as my role as an adolescent doctor and your role as teachers and as parents. Dr. Friedman at the World Health Organization did a very systematic review of all of the positive youth development programs throughout the world, and he came up with this simple equation: love, that's the most important ingredient in all positive youth development programs. So let's switch gears a little bit to how this applies to mindfulness. What exactly is mindfulness? This is Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn's definition. Jon Kabat-Zinn is one of the leaders in bringing mindfulness into Western healthcare, medicine, and education. And he said mindfulness is paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. And those first three are pretty straightforward: attention, intention, and presence. But that last element is a little bit abstract, a little bit tricky: non-judgment. What exactly does that mean? So I'm going to offer a few other ways to think about it. This is the Chinese calligraphy for mindfulness. It's the Chinese translation of a Sanskrit word, which in English we call mindfulness. So the top character is presence. The bottom character is heart. So another way of translating mindfulness is presence of the heart, or heartfulness. And I like this definition because it really emphasizes some of the heart qualities that are really critical for mindfulness to be useful in resilience. So this is the definition that I've been playing with lately. Mindfulness is paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and with unconditional love, bringing those heart qualities to every moment, whether it's a difficult moment or an easy moment. And breathing and smiling, like how we did, that's one concrete practice, one concrete way of doing that. I also want to share a few myths about what mindfulness is not. Mindfulness is not a religion. The way we teach mindfulness historically is influenced by many Buddhist practices, but you don't need to be a Buddhist to practice mindfulness. It's just a way of being in the world, and it's available to anyone of any religion or no religion at all. When we teach mindfulness in the hospital, I'm not asking anyone to believe anything or not believe anything. I'm simply inviting them to pay attention to their own experience and learn from that. And this issue is actually quite critical for those of you working in public schools in particular, including in Canada, including in Vancouver. Mindfulness is also not about emptying your mind. Some people tell me, I had a bad meditation, Dr. Vo, I had all of these thoughts. And so I ask them, well, what is someone who has no thoughts, whose mind is completely blank? They're dead, okay? The mind is always thinking, that's what it does. And so mindfulness isn't about stopping your thoughts, fighting your thoughts, resisting your thoughts. But it is about cultivating a more flexible and wise way of relating with your thoughts, so that way that your thoughts don't drag you down to cause more stress, more anxiety. Mindfulness is not a cure-all, it's not a quick fix, and it's also not selfish. There's this image of mindfulness as people just sitting alone, kind of emptying, blanking out the outside world. But in fact, mindfulness is deeply social. And mindfulness, when we can bring it into our families, our communities, our society, I think it has the potential to change the world. Finally, mindfulness is not a substitute for addressing social determinants of health. Many of the young people I work with are adversely affected by poverty, racism, discrimination, violence, multi-generational trauma. These are not things that they chose. And when I'm teaching a young person mindfulness, I hope that it can help them to be more resilient in the face of those conditions. But at the same time, I think we as adults have a deep responsibility to address those conditions to help young people grow up in healthier environments too. So what are some of these heart qualities that we've been talking about, mindful qualities? I sometimes think about mindfulness as like a bird. And there's two wings that the bird needs to fly. One wing is present moment attention and concentration. And often in the popular media, mindfulness is synonymous with present moment focus, attention, and concentration. But really, that's only one wing of the bird. The other wing are those heart qualities that are so essential to making mindfulness a healing practice. In fact, without the heart qualities, if all we're doing is paying attention in the present moment and focusing, and we're experiencing pain, we're in a difficult and challenging moment, we might actually feel worse. Mindfulness may make things worse. So mindfulness is not really mindfulness without these heart qualities, the second wing of the bird. One of the heart qualities is beginner's mind. I want you to remember a time when you were young and you were maybe walking down a beach or a forest, and you were noticing all of the things on the path, the leaves, the shells, the sounds of the waves, the birds, the sand. And everything felt so new, so exciting, so interesting. That sense of wonder, that sense of curiosity, that's beginner's mind. And we can invite that mind into any activity we do, even if it's something that we've done hundreds or thousands of times. Even if it's something as simple as taking the next breath, we can invite that sense of wonder and curiosity into that moment. That's beginner's mind. The second mindful quality is loving kindness, and this is our puppy, Ella. And so the way I teach young people is imagine that you're holding your puppy or your kitten, and many young people have pets that they love very much. So imagine you're holding your puppy or your kitten, and what is the feeling that you have for your puppy or kitten when you want that puppy or kitten to be well, to feel safe, to be loved? That is loving kindness. And we can invite that quality, that heart, into every moment, into every breath as well. And there are specific meditations and practices that can help us to cultivate that. We're all born with this capacity, but we can grow it. Self-compassion is the third mindful quality that we teach. And I'm going to invite you to experience this right now. So you can get in a comfortable seated position again. Close your eyes if you like. We're going to hear one sound of the bell. And just put your hand on your heart. Breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. And tune in to how your heart feels, both physically. What does your heartbeat feel like right now? What does your chest feel like? And also metaphorically, what is your emotions? What is the state of your heart in this moment? And then with your hand on your heart, just giving yourself a little hug, feeling the warmth that you're offering to your own heart and to yourself. Breathing with that. Breathing in, I know that I am breathing in. Breathing out, I send myself love. Breathing in, sending myself love. And opening your eyes again. So that's a very simple practice of self-compassion. And sometimes in a very challenging and difficult and painful moment, if all we do is put our hands on our heart and take 3 mindful breaths, that is a moment well spent, and that can be healing. I want to contrast self-compassion with self-esteem just for a moment, because self-esteem has been a buzzword in the child development literature for many years. But what we're finding now is that self-compassion may actually be more useful than self-esteem. Self-esteem asks us to kind of teach ourselves, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough. It's like that Saturday Night Live skit that many of you may remember. So it requires positive self-judgment. Self-compassion, on the other hand, means that we deserve to be loved just because we're human. Every human who suffers is worthy of compassion, myself included. Self-esteem is based on our most recent success or failure. So number 1, it's fleeting because the next success or failure is right around the corner. And number 2, it's based on external conditions. And what this does is it makes young people scared of taking risks, scared of failing. And when young people are scared of failing, then they actually rob themselves of the opportunity to learn, because the way that young people learn resilience is to have disappointments, is to have setbacks and learn how to overcome those. So in fact, setbacks and disappointments can be young people's greatest teacher if it's combined with self-compassion. Self-compassion is the young person's best friend, helping them to grow, helping them to learn from that experience. Finally, self-esteem emphasizes separateness. It's like, am I as good as you? Am I as bad as you? So it's judging and comparing oneself in relationship to another person. Self-compassion, on the other hand, emphasizes our connectedness. We're all suffering. We're all in pain at some times. We're all in this together, and we're all worthy of love and care. So those are some differences with self-esteem and self-compassion, and I hope that we start moving our thinking and our practice more towards self-compassion. So mindfulness is not something mysterious. You all have been born with the capacity to do it, but we can train ourselves to be more mindful more of the time. And one way we can do this is with formal meditations. So these are like the things that we just did, those 2 mindfulness experiences, where we stop what we're doing and we take some time just to cultivate that mindful awareness and that capacity that we have, whether it's sitting meditation, body scan, mindful walking. There's so many different ways to do it. It can be done in 10 minutes, in 2 minutes, or in hours or days. It's up to you. And for myself, what I find is that when I'm practicing formal meditations regularly, number one, it's a real gift to myself when I'm really stressed. I've got so many things to do. Just taking a few minutes to be mindful just allows me to be. It allows me to let go of some of those things, at least for a moment. And number two, it helps me to live my life more mindfully as I'm going through my day-to-day life. Thich Nhat Hanh said, peace is every step. And what he meant by this is we don't have to wait until we have time to do formal meditations in order to cultivate our mindfulness. We can bring that same awareness and those same mindful qualities, that beginner's mind, loving kindness, and self-compassion, into every activity that we do. And it can be whether we're brushing our teeth, whether we're eating our breakfast, driving to work, walking our dog. We can bring that into every moment. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. That's really where mindfulness practice helps us to face the real challenges that we go through in our everyday life. In mindfulness, we teach that pain is inevitable, but suffering is, at least to some extent, optional. We can't shield our young people from all the kinds of pain, but suffering has to do with the way we relate to our pain. And if we can cultivate a wise relationship with our pain, maybe we don't have to suffer so much. And young people can really get this. The young people I work with are suffering from serious mental health or medical disorders or both. And what they've learned is how to change their relationship with their pain. I had one young person tell me she had chronic back pain. And she said, you know, Dr. Vo, I didn't realize how tiring it was to be stressed out all the time. But once I was able to deal with my pain differently, I could let go of some of that, and I had so much more energy, even though her pain was still there. Jon Kabat-Zinn said, as long as you're breathing, there is more right with you than there is wrong with you. And this is a great expression of that strength-based perspective that I try to bring into our work and that I try to teach my medical students and my medical residents. What I'm trying to do is look for the strengths, the internal and external protective factors that that young person is demonstrating and showing in their lives, and say it out loud, validate it, and help build on it. And sometimes, in a really tough situation, just showing up is a sign of courage. Just being in school, just being in my doctor's office, just being in the counselor's office, just taking that one mindful breath with me can be a huge strength and a huge act of courage. So just acknowledging that and building on that can really help young people to be resilient. In our mindfulness group at our hospital, we teach young people how to practice mindfulness to deal with some of the real life situations that they face in their lives. For example, handling school stress. I had one young person who had what's called a juvenile idiopathic arthritis, so his joints were in pain all the time. And we taught him a practice called the body scan, where we bring our mindful awareness to our bodies from toe to head, one part at a time, and also bringing self-compassion to that. And what he told me was really powerful. He said, you know, before I learned this, I would get pain and then I would have so much anxiety. and that would just worsen my pain. And he had missed months and months of school because of his pain and his anxiety. And he said, once I learned how to do this body scan and actually make friends with my body some more, I didn't get so anxious. And then I didn't get so stressed. And also learned how to be easier on myself when it comes to school, because I used to get really down on myself and judge myself if I missed school or got any grade lower than an A. But since I've learned how to be more compassionate to myself, I give myself a break, and I congratulate myself just for making it to school or just for turning in an assignment. And so he was able to get back to school and really function more at his potential rather than missing more and more school. So this is an example of how mindfulness can help young people be resilient in the face of serious illness. Just a word about the research on mindfulness. It's still very early days. There's somewhere around 50 peer-reviewed studies, so we don't have nearly as much data as we have in adults, but the early data looks promising that mindfulness can help with attention, with sleep, with medical health, with emotional regulation, with risk behaviors, with chronic illness, and with social behaviors as well. So the word is promising, but we still have a lot of work to do. So I'd like to switch gears and just share a few pearls about how we can bring mindfulness to our young people, we as adults, as doctors, counselors, teachers, and parents. Take my advice, I'm not using it. Kids hear this stuff all the time, and it might not be said, but it's when an adult is telling a young person to do something, and the kid is like, well, you're not really doing that yourself in your own life, right? So it comes across to a young person as hypocritical and disrespectful. So one of the most important things, if we want our young people to be mindful, is to be mindful ourselves, is to cultivate and practice our own capacity for mindfulness. And our young people will learn from that, even if they're not going to sit down and do a 10-minute silent meditation with their eyes closed. First Nations elder in BC said, when someone is hurting, just your presence is medicine. Sometimes when we're with a young person who's in crisis, I feel like, okay, what am I going to say or do that's going to kind of fix this situation? But what I've learned over time is that it's not what I say or do that makes the biggest difference. It's actually the quality of my presence that makes the biggest difference, because that young person isn't going to remember, oh, this doctor did this or said that. But what they are going to remember is this person was really there for me, was really present for me when I needed someone. So our true presence, our open-hearted, mindful presence, is actually the biggest gift that we can give our young people. Ron Epstein has really brought mindfulness into medicine, teaching doctors how to be mindful. And so he came up with this equation. Caregiver resilience is intention plus skills plus community plus institutional support. And so let's look at that for a minute. Intention. Well, you all have that intention just because you came here. Skills. These are things that we can cultivate and learn and teach. Community. Maybe today is the beginning or a continuation of building a mindful community among ourselves so we can be more resilient. Institutional support. I'll leave that to you to ask yourselves, does my institution support me in building a resilient and mindful culture? If not, how can I change that? How can I make that more part of the culture at our schools, on our community levels, and even at bigger levels? Finally, planting seeds. So I had one young person who I was bringing to our mindfulness groups. She didn't seem that she was getting anything out of it. She was in the back. She would be on her phone the whole time or giggling with her sister. This went on for months, and I thought, is she getting anything out of this mindfulness group? And then one day, this was in the community at a community center in our inner city in Vancouver. So one day I came into the community center, and she was really excited to see me. She said, hey, Dr. Dzung, let me tell you what just happened. And I said, yeah, I'd love to hear it. She said, well, I had to do a medical procedure, and I was starting to really freak out and get anxious. And it got so bad that the technician said, if you don't calm down, we're going to have to cancel this procedure. And then I freaked out even more because I didn't want to cancel it. I knew that I would just have to do it again. So I said, wait a minute, let me do this thing that Dr. Dzung taught me. And the guy was like, okay, whatever, do what you need to do, I don't know what you mean. So she said, I closed my eyes and I breathed, and I heard your voice guiding me through those breathing things that you do in the groups. You didn't think I was paying attention, but I heard it, and I could hear your voice, and I just breathed. And then by the time I opened my eyes, the procedure was done. And I said, wow, that's amazing, what did you learn from that? And what I think she learned from that is that she had a power that she didn't know she had, that she was able to tap into when she needed it. And what I learned from that is that I had been planting seeds. I was skeptical that it was doing any good for her. I thought it was a big waste of time. But I was planting seeds, and at the right moment, when she needed it, those seeds sprouted. And I think all of you who have worked with young people have seen things like that. It makes it very hard to research. In fact, if we could learn how to research and document this, I'd really like to do that. But in the meantime, those of us who have worked with young people, we've all experienced that. So if you're bringing mindfulness to your young people with heart, with integrity, and you're embodying it yourself, I think you can have confidence that it's planting seeds, even if it's not showing up in the way or the time that you expect it to. I'd like to leave you with one final practice. This is called the sober breathing space. This is a combination of a formal and informal practice that you can do anytime. It takes about 2 to 3 minutes. And you imagine an hourglass, and your attention goes wide, narrow, wide. And this is something that we teach the teens in our program at the hospital, and they do this throughout their day, and it's really helpful. So we'll start with one sound of the bell. S is for stopping, just stopping what you are doing, stopping what you are about to say or do, getting out of autopilot mode, being present. O, observe what's happening right now in this moment, without judging, without trying to push anything away. What's happening in your body? What's happening in your emotions? What feelings are arising? What's happening in your thoughts? Where is your mind right now? With the next breath, gathering your awareness. As you breathe out, focusing your awareness just on the breath, coming to the narrow part of the hourglass. And for now, as best you can, just keeping your awareness just on the breath. Perhaps picking a point in your body, maybe the tip of your nose or your belly button, and experiencing the sensation of breathing just at that point. Breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. And if your mind wanders off, you're distracted, that's okay. That's what the mind does. Simply bringing it back with the next breath. In, out. Now expanding your awareness again. Checking in with your body. What sensations are you noticing now? Checking in with your emotions. Are there any feelings present? And is anything different, or is it the same as when we started? And where is your mind right now? What is the quality of your thoughts? Hearing one sound of the bell to end, and R is respond. That means carrying on with your day as best you can with mindful awareness. And I would invite you to have your lunch mindfully and enjoy the afternoon at this conference with awareness and with loving kindness for yourself and the rest of us. So thank you for joining me. My book, The Mindful Teen, has everything that I've shared today in language just for teenagers, and I'll be outside sharing that, and look forward to seeing you for the rest of the conference. Thank you.